I never thought I'd be one of those guys. The ones who get blindsided by something so obvious in hindsight that they feel like absolute idiots for not seeing it sooner. But life has a funny way of humbling you when you least expect it. My name is Ethan Reynolds. I'm 38, detective in Boston, and up until last month, I thought I had a solid marriage. I was wrong. It all started with a promotion. Not mine, hers. Olivia, my wife of 11 years, had worked her way up from a junior architect to a project manager at one of the top firms in the city. She put in long hours, but it paid off. When she got the promotion, she was ecstatic. I was happy for her, genuinely. We went out to celebrate, had a fancy dinner, popped open a bottle of wine when we got home. It was one of the rare nights we both had off at the same time, and we made the most of it. I remember thinking that night, as she curled up next to me, that life was good. Then, things started to change. At first, it was little things. Olivia started working even later than usual. She had sudden business trips that never seemed to be planned in advance. I chalked it up to her new responsibilities and the pressure of the job. But then she started being different. She was always on her phone, and when I walked into the room, she'd lock the screen or turn it face down. She started taking extra care with her appearance, wearing perfume on days when she claimed she'd just be stuck in meetings. It wasn't like she had ever been the most passionate person, but we had always been consistent. That changed. It became infrequent, almost robotic when it did happen, like she was just going through the motions. I told myself I was being paranoid. I'd seen too many cases at work, men and women who destroyed their relationships over suspicions that turned out to be nothing. I didn't want to be that guy, so I ignored it. I let it slide. I convinced myself that I was just stressed from work and projecting my anxieties onto her. And then, one evening, something happened that I couldn't ignore. It was a Wednesday night, and I was supposed to be working late. A case had just broken open, and my partner and I were up to our necks in reports and witness statements. But by some miracle, we wrapped up early. Instead of texting Olivia, I decided to surprise her. I stopped by our favorite bakery and picked up some pastries she loved, the one she always said made a long day better. I was excited. I missed her. I wanted to reconnect, to shake off whatever weird distance had been growing between us. I got home around 9 p.m. The apartment was dark. Olivia's car was in the garage, so I knew she was home. At first, I thought maybe she had fallen asleep early. But as I walked in, I heard something. The faint sound of laughter coming from the back patio. Our place had a small balcony that overlooked the city, one of the reasons we had chosen this apartment. She loved sitting out there at night with a glass of wine. I moved quietly, unsure of why I suddenly felt like I needed to be stealthy in my own home. And then I saw it. Through the glass doors, Olivia was standing outside, her phone in hand, grinning in a way I hadn't seen in a long time. It wasn't just a smile. It was the kind of smile you give someone when you're completely invested in them. The kind of smile she used to give me. I stepped closer, listening. Her voice was low, playful. "I miss you too," she murmured, twirling a strand of her hair. A pause. Then she laughed again, softer this time. "No, Ethan's working late. You know how it is." My stomach dropped. I didn't move. I didn't make a sound. I just stood there, frozen, as my wife continued her conversation, completely unaware that I was watching her world unravel in real time. I had seen liars before, interrogated them, read their body language, picked apart their alibis. But I never thought I'd be on the receiving end of it. I should have walked out right then, confronted her, made a scene, but I didn't. Instead, I stepped back, left the pastries on the counter, and walked into the bedroom, pretending I had just arrived. "Hey, babe," I called out, forcing my voice to sound normal. "You home?" There was a pause. Then, the sound of hurried footsteps. A moment later, Olivia appeared in the doorway, her phone nowhere in sight. "Hey," she said, her smile a little too forced, her tone a little too high. "I thought you were working late." "Got done early," I said casually, watching her reaction. She licked her lips, nodded. "That's great," she said. "I was just, catching up on emails." "Liar." I nodded, pretending I believed her. "Good. I picked up those pastries you like," I said, pointing to the bag on the counter. Her eyes flickered to it, and for a second, I saw guilt flash across her face. It was brief, but it was there. "That's sweet," she said, walking over to give me a quick kiss on the cheek. It felt like nothing, like a transaction. That night, as she lay next to me, her breathing slow and steady, I stared at the ceiling. My mind was racing. Something was happening, and I was going to find out exactly what it was. The next morning, Olivia woke up like nothing had happened. She stretched, gave me a sleepy smile, and went straight to the bathroom. I lay there, staring at the ceiling, trying to convince myself that maybe I had misinterpreted what I heard. Maybe it wasn't what it looked like. But I knew better. I've spent the last 15 years picking apart stories, looking for cracks in people's words, and knowing when someone was lying to me. And Olivia? She was lying. I got up and made coffee like usual. Olivia walked into the kitchen, dressed for work, her hair still damp from the shower. She smelled like vanilla and citrus, the same perfume she used to wear when we first started dating. Maybe she thought a little effort would make me forget what I saw last night. "Morning," she said, grabbing a mug. "Morning," I replied, watching her carefully. She didn't look at me, just scrolled through her phone as she took a sip of coffee. I saw the way her fingers hesitated over the screen, the way she glanced up at me before quickly looking away. She was being careful. I leaned against the counter. "Late night?" I asked casually. She glanced at me, then back at her phone. You were up when I got home." "Oh, yeah, just winding down after work." Her answer was too quick, too smooth. She had already prepared it. I nodded, pretending to accept it. "Anything interesting?" I asked. She finally looked up. "What?" "Your emails," I said. "You said you were catching up on them when I got home." For a split second, there was something in her expression, something tight, like she was trying to figure out how much I knew. But then she forced a smile. "Oh, just the usual. Clients, scheduling, nothing important." I let the silence stretch between us. She shifted, uncomfortable. "Busy day ahead?" I asked, still keeping my tone casual. She nodded. "Yeah, a few meetings. I might be late again." "Right." She finally put her phone down, studying me. "Everything okay?" "Yeah, just tired." She searched my face, but I kept my expression neutral. After a moment, she gave a small nod and went back to drinking her coffee. I waited. I wanted to see if she would say something else, maybe make an excuse for last night. But she didn't. I grabbed my own phone and opened up our phone bill app while she was distracted. I scrolled through the call logs. There it was, a number I didn't recognize, appearing almost every night for the past 3 months. I copied it and saved it. Olivia finished her coffee, gave me a quick kiss, and grabbed her bag. "I'll see you tonight." I watched her walk out the door, my jaw clenched. The moment I heard her car pull away, I sat down and started digging. The number wasn't in her saved contacts, which meant she had been careful. But she hadn't been careful enough. I ran the number through a database I had access to at work. It was registered to a Christopher Barnes. I stared at the name. I didn't recognize it. Not a coworker of hers that I knew of. Not a friend. Not family. I checked the texts. There were hundreds. Almost all of them were deleted, but the timestamps told me everything I needed to know. I took a breath, forcing myself to stay calm. It wasn't enough proof yet. I needed more. That day at work, I was distracted. My partner, Dan, noticed. "You good?" he asked as we sat in the car on a stakeout. "Yeah," I lied. He gave me a look, but didn't push. I was grateful. When I got home that night, Olivia wasn't there yet. I checked our security camera footage from the front door. She had left in the morning like usual, but instead of coming home after work, she had gone somewhere else. The footage showed her car leaving, but no return yet. I sat down at the kitchen table, phone in my hand. My gut was telling me exactly what was happening, but I needed to see it for myself. At 10:17 p.m., the garage door finally opened. I stayed seated as she walked in, her heels clicking against the floor. "Hey," she said, setting down her purse. "Hey." She walked over and kissed me on the cheek. "Long day?" I nodded. "You." "Exhausting." She stretched. "I just want to shower and pass out." I looked at her clothes. The blouse she was wearing had a slight wrinkle to it, like it had been buttoned and unbuttoned a few times. Her lipstick was smudged at the corner. "Dinner?" I asked. She shook her head. "I grabbed something on the way home." "Where from?" She hesitated. "Just for a second. That Thai place near the office." I nodded. She grabbed her purse and walked toward the bedroom. I waited until she was in the bathroom, then quietly walked over and checked the bag she had set down. Inside was a crumpled receipt. I pulled it out. 7:42 p.m., the Lexington Hotel. Not a restaurant. A hotel. My stomach clenched. I shoved the receipt back into her purse and sat down, gripping the edge of the table. I wasn't angry. Not yet. What I felt was something colder, something sharper. I had spent my entire career chasing criminals, following the evidence, trusting facts over emotions. This was no different. The difference was, this time, the suspect was my wife. The shower ran for 10 minutes. She walked out wrapped in a towel, her skin pink from the heat. She looked at me and smiled. Coming to bed? I forced a smile back. Yeah, just finishing something up. She nodded and disappeared into the bedroom. I sat there for another hour, staring at nothing. At exactly 11:30 p.m., I picked up my phone and made a call. Hey, it's me, I said when Dan answered, groggy from sleep. What's up? I need a favor. Dan sighed. This better be good. I told him I needed access to a private investigator. Someone discreet. Someone who wouldn't ask too many questions. Dan didn't hesitate. Give me 10 minutes. I hung up and leaned back in my chair, exhaling slowly. The game had changed. I wasn't just going to catch Olivia in a lie. I was going to catch her in the act. Dan called me back 20 minutes later with a name. James Nolan. Private investigator. Ex-cop. Worked Vice before he left the force and started his own agency. No nonsense, discreet, and efficient. Exactly what I needed. I called him that night. Ethan Reynolds? His voice was low, gravelly. Then told me you needed a job done. That's right. Who's the target? My wife. There was a pause. Got it. We arranged a meeting for the next morning at a diner downtown. I barely slept. I lay next to Olivia, staring at the ceiling, listening to the steady rhythm of her breathing. The woman beside me, the one I thought I knew, was a stranger now. By the time morning came, I was out of the house before she even woke up. I drove to the diner, parked across the street, and walked in. Nolan was already there, sitting in a booth in the back, a cup of black coffee in front of him. He looked up as I approached. Reynolds. He gestured for me to sit. What are we dealing with? I slid into the booth. I need proof. Video, photos, timestamps. I already have a name, Christopher Barnes. Nolan nodded. You sure she's cheating? I pulled out my phone, opened the security footage, and showed him Olivia leaving late at night. Then, I placed the crumpled hotel receipt on the table. Fair enough, he said, pocketing the receipt. Give me 3 days. I shook his hand and left. The next 3 days were the longest of my life. I went through the motions at work, but my mind wasn't there. I avoided Olivia as much as I could. She barely noticed. She was too busy texting someone when she thought I wasn't looking. Then, on the third night, Nolan called me. I've got what you need. I met him at his office, a small place above a pawn shop. He handed me a manila folder. Everything's in there. I opened it. Photos. Olivia and Christopher Barnes. Meeting at restaurants. Sitting close. Holding hands. Getting into his car. Then, the final shots, both of them entering a hotel together. The timestamps didn't lie. I stared at the pictures, feeling nothing. Not anger. Not sadness. Just cold, hard certainty. Want more? Nolan asked. This is enough. All right. You need anything else, let me know. I paid him and left. I drove around for an hour, gripping the folder like it was a case file instead of my own life falling apart. Then, I went home. Olivia was in the kitchen, pouring a glass of wine. She smiled when she saw me. Hey, you're home early. I dropped the folder on the counter. Open it. She frowned. What is this? Just open it. She hesitated, then flipped it open. Her face drained of color as she flipped through the pictures. Her fingers trembled. What is this? Her voice was barely above a whisper. You tell me. She looked up at me, her eyes wide. Ethan, I cut her off. Don't lie. Don't waste my time. Her mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. She set the folder down, her hand gripping the edge of the counter like she was trying to steady herself. I was going to tell you, she finally said. I laughed. A short, humorless sound. When? After the next hotel visit? She flinched. It wasn't. Don't. I snapped. Don't tell me it wasn't what it looks like. I've seen enough liars to know one when I hear one. She swallowed hard, blinking rapidly. I made a mistake. No. You made a choice. Tears welled up in her eyes. Ethan, please. I grabbed the folder and shoved it back toward her. Spare me the act. I want the truth. She hesitated, then finally spoke. It started a few months ago. After the promotion. I didn't plan for it to happen, but I slammed my hand on the counter. Bullshit. You planned every single lie you told me. She flinched again, tears streaming down her face now. I didn't mean to hurt you. But you did. I took a deep breath, trying to keep my voice steady. How long? She wiped at her face. 5 months. I clenched my fists. Do you love him? She hesitated. That was enough of an answer. I let out a slow breath. You're disgusting. She sobbed. Ethan, please, we can fix this. I shook my head. No. You broke it. You don't come back from this. She reached for my hand, but I stepped back. Don't touch me. She broke down completely, sinking onto the floor, crying into her hands. I stared at her for a long moment, then turned and walked out the door. I needed air. I needed space. But most of all, I needed to decide how I was going to end this. I sat in my car for an hour, gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. Olivia's sobs still echoed in my ears, but they didn't mean anything to me. She wasn't crying because she was sorry. She was crying because she got caught. I wasn't the kind of man who let things slide. I spent my life chasing down criminals, making sure justice was served. This was no different. Olivia had made her choices. Now, I was going to make mine. I needed to be smart about this. Explosive reactions only got people in trouble. I'd seen men throw their lives away over situations like this, letting rage take control. I wasn't going to be one of them. I pulled out my phone and called Dan. You sound like shit, he said when he picked up. Meet me at O'Malley's, I said. He sighed. This about your wife. Just meet me. 20 minutes later, Dan slid into the booth across from me, setting his beer down. All right, talk. I handed him the folder. He flipped through it, shaking his head. I took a sip of my drink, letting the silence sit between us. You got a plan? He asked. I need everything on this guy, I said, tapping Christopher Barnes' name on one of the photos. His job, his family, his weaknesses. Dan raised an eyebrow. You're gonna burn his life down, aren't you? He deserves it. Dan nodded slowly. All right, I'll make some calls. While he worked his contacts, I started putting together my own plan. Olivia wanted to act like her life wasn't falling apart. Fine. I'd show her just how wrong she was. First, I made sure to quietly separate our bank accounts. I moved half of our savings into a private account under my name. I wasn't about to let her take a single dollar more than she deserved. Then, I went to see a divorce attorney. I wanted this done fast, and I wanted it done in a way that left her with nothing. Massachusetts wasn't exactly favorable to men in divorces, but with proof of infidelity, I had leverage. The lawyer went over the options. With these photos, you could fight for a better settlement, she said. Alimony is still a possibility, but this gives you an upper hand. Do it, I said. File as soon as possible. The next step was making sure Olivia felt the consequences immediately. She was still living in our apartment like she had a right to be there. That was going to change. When I got home that night, she was sitting on the couch, eyes red from crying. She looked up when I walked in. Ethan. I ignored her, walking past her into the bedroom. I grabbed a suitcase and started packing my things. Her breath hitched. What are you doing? I zipped up the bag and turned to her. I'm not the one who should be leaving. She stood up, walking toward me hesitantly. We can talk about this. There's nothing to talk about, I said. You cheated. We're done. She wiped at her eyes. We don't have to rush this. We can go to therapy, try to fix. I laughed. You want therapy? Go get it with your boyfriend. She flinched. He's not my boyfriend. Don't insult me, Olivia. She swallowed hard, looking desperate. Please, Ethan. I don't want to lose you. You lost me the second you walked into that hotel. She broke down again, but I was done listening. I grabbed my bag and walked toward the door. Where are you going? She asked. Away from you. I left without looking back. I crashed at Dan's place for the night. He handed me a beer and sat across from me. I dug into Barnes, he said. I leaned forward. And Dan smirked. He's married. I felt something cold settle in my chest. You sure? Dan nodded. Wife's name is Emily. 2 kids. Lives in a nice suburban neighborhood. I exhaled slowly. Good. Dan raised an eyebrow. What are you thinking? I didn't answer. I already knew what I was going to do. The next morning, I found Emily Barnes' Facebook. Pictures of her and her husband. Pictures of their kids. A life that she thought was whole. I sent her a message. Hi, Emily. I think we need to talk. She replied within an hour. Who are you? I sent her one of the photos. Olivia and Christopher, hand in hand. The typing bubbles appeared, then stopped, then appeared again. Where did you get this? I'm Olivia's husband. Your husband has been cheating on you. I have proof. She called me immediately. I picked up. Her voice was shaking. Tell me everything. I told her. Everything. Every late-night text. Every hotel visit. Every lie. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. She just listened. When I was done, she was silent for a long time. Then, she exhaled sharply. "Thank you," she said. I could hear the steel in her voice. She wasn't just hurt. She was furious. We made a plan. That night, I went home. Olivia was sitting at the table, looking hopeful. "I made dinner," she said softly. I sat down. "I know about Emily." Her face went pale. "What?" "Christopher's wife," I said. I told her everything. Her mouth opened, but no words came out. "She's divorcing him," I said. "And I'm divorcing you." Tears welled up in her eyes. "Ethan, please." I shook my head. "It's over, Olivia." She broke down, sobbing, but I felt nothing. No pity. No regret. The next morning, Emily Barnes kicked Christopher out of their house. She threw all his belongings onto the front lawn. Neighbors watched. His kids cried. He begged, but she didn't care. And Olivia? She got served divorce papers that same day. I wasn't done yet. Christopher worked at Olivia's firm. I made sure his bosses got a copy of the hotel receipt. Workplace affairs didn't go over well there. He lost his job by the end of the week. Olivia lost her reputation. It was everything she had built her career on: trust, professionalism, respect. All gone. She came to me one last time, begging. "Please," she whispered. "I can't fix this without you." I looked at her, the woman I once loved, and felt absolutely nothing. That's not my problem. I turned and walked away. The aftermath of everything unraveled quickly. Olivia didn't move out immediately, but her presence in the apartment became unbearable. She stayed in the guest room, avoiding me as much as possible, as if her silence would erase what she had done. I didn't speak to her unless absolutely necessary. Every interaction was transactional. A nod when she walked past me, a brief exchange of words if we crossed paths in the kitchen. She tried a few times to start conversations, hesitating as if searching for the right words, but I had no patience for whatever excuse she was trying to build in her head. At work, things were business as usual. My colleagues noticed I was quieter than usual, but no one pried. Dan, the only one who knew the full story, didn't bring it up unless I did. He was giving me space, which I appreciated. The only time it felt real was at night, lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, knowing she was just a few feet away but in an entirely different world. The past 11 years had dissolved into something I couldn't recognize, and I realized I had been living in a false sense of security for a long time. Olivia didn't go to work for a few days. I knew why. People in her office had already started whispering. Christopher Barnes was gone, dismissed quietly but effectively. Olivia was still employed, but her professional image had taken a hit. She had built a reputation as a hard-working, trustworthy leader, but now she was the woman who got involved with a married colleague, a man who lost his family and career over her. They didn't fire her, but she had been placed under scrutiny. She wasn't getting invited to the meetings she used to lead. Her position hadn't changed on paper, but everyone knew she had lost respect, and in a field like hers, respect was everything. Emily Barnes reached out again. She wanted to thank me for exposing the truth, but I could tell she was still processing the destruction of her own life. She had wasted years on a man who turned out to be a fraud, just like I had wasted them on Olivia. She didn't ask what my next steps were, and I didn't ask about hers. We had both done what needed to be done, and there was nothing else to say. I came home one evening to find Olivia sitting at the dining table, a single sheet of paper in front of her. It was the divorce settlement. She had finally signed it. She had stalled for a week, trying to convince me to talk, trying to drag out a discussion that I refused to have. She had gone from defensive to apologetic to desperate, but none of it mattered. The damage was irreversible. Now, her silence said what I had been waiting for: she had given up. I took the papers, looked them over, and signed my own name at the bottom. She watched me, but I didn't meet her eyes. Without a word, I walked away, leaving her to sit in whatever emptiness she had created for herself. She started packing that weekend. I didn't ask where she was going. She didn't tell me. She took what was hers, leaving behind the things that didn't matter anymore. I didn't watch her go. The door closed softly behind her, and just like that, she was gone. There was no relief, no triumph, just quiet. The apartment felt different after Olivia left. Not emptier, just quieter. Her presence had been an irritation in the final weeks, like background noise that grated against my nerves. Now, without her, I wasn't sure if I felt better or just numb. I went through my routine as if nothing had changed, waking up at the same time, going to work, eating dinner in front of the TV. But there was a space in my life where she used to be, and even though I no longer wanted her there, it still existed. I didn't tell many people about the divorce. There was no need. Dan knew, and a few others at work probably figured something was wrong, but I didn't give them details. It wasn't their business. My parents had never been particularly close to Olivia, so when I finally mentioned it to them, they just nodded and moved on. There were no words of comfort, no unnecessary sympathy. That was fine with me. The only time I heard Olivia's name again was when Emily Barnes messaged me. She had finalized her own divorce, and she wanted to let me know. She said Christopher had tried to fight it, but with the evidence, he had no leverage. She got the house, custody of the kids, and enough financial support to ensure he wouldn't recover easily. He had lost everything. I read her message twice, then put my phone down. I didn't reply right away. There was nothing left to say. We had both done what we set out to do. Her marriage was over. Mine was over. Justice had been served, if you could call it that. But there was no satisfaction in it, no sense of victory. Just the end of something that should have lasted but didn't. Weeks passed. Life settled into a new pattern. I worked. I slept. I ate. I stopped thinking about Olivia as often. The memories of her betrayal no longer hit me like a fresh wound. They were just facts now, something that had happened, something I had moved past. One evening, I came home to find a letter in my mailbox. No return address, but I knew who it was from before I even opened it. Olivia's handwriting was unmistakable. I stood in the kitchen, holding the envelope, debating whether to read it or just throw it away. In the end, curiosity won. She wrote that she was sorry, that she had been lost in her own selfishness and hadn't realized how much she was destroying. She admitted she didn't expect me to forgive her, but she wanted me to know she regretted everything. She said she missed me, that she would always miss me, but she understood why I could never look at her the same way again. I folded the letter and placed it in a drawer. I didn't need her apology. It changed nothing. She wasn't asking to come back, and even if she had, there was no place for her in my life anymore. Whatever love I had once felt for her was gone. The next morning, I threw the letter away. There was nothing left to hold on to.